Hey there, it's Olivia Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you a recent reads video. In this video I'm going to be talking about 10 books that I've recently read and sharing my thoughts and feelings on each of those books. And in the description box down below I'll have content warnings if that's something you might need or want to check on. But without further ado, let me tell you about 10 of my recent reads. Is Brokeback Mountain by Annie Proulx, and this is the short story, it's only 55 pages long, that inspired the very well-known successful Brokeback Mountain film. Now this is a book about two cowboys who are queer and who fall in love in a time when it's not seen as good to be queer, and it's about their love story and how they came to be and what happens in the years that follows. So I read this one not having seen the film before, so I didn't know where the story was going to go whatsoever, and I really enjoyed it. It hit me so hard. I didn't expect a short story to get me so emotionally in the gut, but it really did. And I have to say that starting this book, it takes a while to warm up to it. It's written with a bit of a southern twang to its writing style, and also it really gets down to business. Within a very short matter of pages, these two cowboys are going at it in a bit more explicit detail than I expected from a book written in this time period. It's not like Sarah Simone level of steamy, but it's still a lot more on the nose about what's happening than I thought it was going to be. But even though I got off to a bit of a rocky start with how it doesn't do any characterization, it doesn't do much setting, it kind of just drops you right into the story, it then really warmed up for me, and I really liked it the more that I read it. And that's because of the way that Annie has written this. She does something where she does zoom through what's happening quite quickly, but for every couple of steps forwards in the timeline that she takes, she'll then give you a moment that's about 2 steps back. She'll refer to something that one of them has done, or a scene that we don't get to see in detail but that has happened in the past, which slowly accumulate. All of those past scenes, they accumulate to make us understand the true love that these two people share. And I wasn't expecting it to see the characterization slowly build throughout the short story as we understand why each of them makes the choices that they do, and why each of them acts the way that they do, and what they're each wanting to get out of their love story, and who is the one who is trying to hold back more, or who's trying to think of the larger picture more. Slowly that builds up, and before I knew it I was actually quite invested in these characters and also the choices they were making and what was happening to them. And it was almost, well, it wasn't almost, it was very heartbreaking seeing how both of their choices were being driven by outward and external factors of homophobia and the way that they would likely be treated if they were out as queer. But equally you get to see how internalized homophobia is also affecting their relationship and affecting the choices that both of them make. And it was a harrowing tale of what happens in this time, and the ending really got to me. So I really enjoyed this short story. I didn't expect it to hit me as hard as it did, but it truly did. And I also finally read Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert, which is the third and final book in the Brown Sisters trilogy. I gave this book 5 stars and it became a new favourite, and I can officially say, after giving each of the books 5 stars, that the Brown Sisters series is one of my all-time favourite romance series. It's just perfect. In this one in particular, you're following Eve Brown, who is told by her parents that she needs to act her age and grow up. She spent her time bouncing between career paths, and her parents have had it. They said they will not be giving her any more money. She needs to choose something to do, settle down, and show that she's committed for at least 1 year. So what Eve decides to do is swan off, and she ends up at a B&B where she sees a little poster that says "Help Wanted," and she goes for the job. However, when she's getting interviewed, the boss that she would potentially be working for is absolutely horrible, and that's where our story starts. Now, it took me a little bit of time to warm up to Jacob, who is the love interest in this book, because he was so mean when he first meets Eve, like incredibly mean, and I struggle a lot with mean characters, so I was not on board. But quickly things happen that I did not expect, and it kind of leaves you with a certain trope that I personally adore. And then I warmed up to Jacob quite quickly after that, because he became a little smooch ball. And and it was very nice to see that turnaround, but also quite believable. I immediately liked Eve Brown though. She is a ball of sunshine that I think a lot of us can relate to. Well, she is the sunshine to this grumpy sunshine dynamic, and she comes across as very warm and very welcoming, and she loves her cooking, and she seems incredibly confident. Underneath the surface, she's harboring a lot of self-doubt, a lot of worry about failure and consistent failure, and also a lot of imposter syndrome. And those are all things that I personally can relate to, and I'm sure so many other people can relate to as well. So I really liked Eve Brown for that reason. I connected to her, and I just loved seeing things from her side, from her plaits that she always had in bright colours, like me, to the way that she's always listening to music. She has fantastic music taste, by the way. Just, I loved her character so much. And both her and Jacob have to do a lot of growing in order to make their relationship work, not to ignore the fact that they have the boss employee dynamic that they're going to need to either work through or change or work over to make the romance in this book work. As I read this one, I was just having more and more joy every time I turned the page. I was smiling, I was giggling, I was laughing, because the situations that they end up in are so silly, but they're also so enjoyable to read. And as it is the last book in a series, I equally have to say that I like how it all wrapped together. The cameos that you get from the previous characters in the series to the way that this particular love story came to a conclusion. It was all really tastefully done, and I just love Talia Hibbert's writing. She does write some steam in this. It's very playful steam. It doesn't get too down and dirty if you don't want anything overtly explicit, but it's on the page, it's steamy level, and it's fun steamy, and it's good steam, and it's written very well. I should mention as well that Jacob, our love interest here, is autistic. You do get to see from his point of view, and from what I understand from autistic reviewers, the autism representation in this is A+. The black representation in this is fantastic too, and then I also read more reviews that says the fat girl rep that Eve Brown sports is also really good, and it manages to touch on what it's like to love someone with your disability, to be yourself and try and go for jobs as someone who is black and fat, where image is a main factor. It manages to touch on loads of those things, as well as childhood trauma to do with disability, while at the same time giving us a very good, very wholesome love story that's not all about the disability representation, that's not all about being a black woman. And I love Talia Hibbert for managing to pull that off. The only quibble I have with this one is the fact that the third act breakup did not really need to happen. We didn't need that conflict, but you know what, I don't care that it was there, because it makes for a more well-rounded story, and I still had such a good time reading this that I was smiling all the way through any moment, and I couldn't give this book less than 5 stars. I finished it and I immediately wanted to start rereading this series all again. This book brings me so much joy. I read Trespasses by Louise Kennedy, and this one was on the Women's Prize list for a year, and I felt okay about it. So Trespasses is about a young Irish woman who's living through the Troubles period, and she starts an affair with an older man, and it's about her trying to live a normal life against the backdrop of the Troubles. I should have really thought about the synopsis to this one a bit more, because I particularly don't enjoy reading about cheating. That's a personal thing, that's a personal choice. I just don't really find any enjoyment of reading books where cheating is happening. And so a book all about a young 25-ish-year-old woman who's in a relationship with a much older married man and having that affair is not going to really tick my boxes, is it? So I should have thought about that a bit more, and so it doesn't surprise me that I only felt okay about this book. But I equally also didn't really connect to Louise Kennedy's writing style. Something about it left me feeling quite emotionally distant from the story and the narrative, and I just didn't sink into it the way that I wanted to. And I think a lot of this book hinges on the fact that you believe that these two characters who are having this affair are in love and they should be together, but I personally did not see that while I was reading, and so I wasn't very invested in their relationship or invested in some of the consequences of their relationship. What I think this book did do very well was showing Ireland during the time of the Troubles, showing some of the social conflicts as well as the larger conflicts that was causing, and you can see the conflict, I have to say again, of them trying to live their ordinary lives in this incredibly violent time where violence is all around them every day. And what I especially liked about this is that our main character here is a teacher, and I personally find teaching and education positions really interesting in times of conflict, because there is concept of what should you be teaching the children, the propaganda that could be fed to children, and also like the new generation that's coming up, how are they perceiving things, how are they feeling in the midst of all of that. And that's what I think Louise Kennedy did very well in this novel, is depicting what it's like to be a teacher, trying to be a caring teacher while trying not to project your own opinions on the children. I thought that was all done very, very well. So there are some elements to this that I think makes this book worth reading, but the main ones are the ones that I really didn't connect to. Lastly, towards the end of this book, something significant happens and changes that leaves more of an emotional mark, and that rang more true with me. It's also one of the themes that I really especially love reading about. So when it got to that point, I got a bit more intrigued and a bit more invested. And that's why I don't think this book is bad. It was just an okay mixed bag reading for me, because it did take until that last 50 to 100 pages before I was actually reading and caring about what I was reading in more detail. I read People Person by Candice Carty-Williams. This is by the author of Queenie, and I really liked Queenie when I read it last year, so I was very intrigued by her latest novel and I wanted to see what I would think of it. And the answer is I also really enjoyed this. In fact, I think I enjoyed this one more than Queenie. Now in this one you're following 5 siblings, but they are all, or mostly all, half siblings. They all have the same no good Jamaican father who has gone around and slept with each of their mums over the years and produced these 5 children. And at one point when they're younger, they all meet each other. He decides it's time for them all to get to know each other, and after that they go their separate ways. Their lives are different and separate, but they each have contact. A contact number that they can reach out to at any time. None of them do until our main character here, Dimple, goes through a life-changing event that's entirely unexpected and she needs help, so she calls her siblings. And that's where the plot of this story goes. And I had a very good time reading this. First of all, I really liked it because it was literary fiction with a plot. I think one of my larger complaints reading a lot of genre fiction is that literary fiction sometimes tends to dither around beautiful writing but not really go anywhere. However, this one, it had a plot, it had a point, it had a centerpiece that this whole novel was around. And I really liked that. I thought it was something intriguing. I think it was a bit suspenseful even. I wondered when they were going to be caught, or when something was going to happen, or what the next layer was going to be added to the situation. It was a very good situation to base a whole book around. But equally, while this did have a plot, it did amazing characterization. I loved getting to see and know all of the siblings in more and more detail, because they're all so distinctive to each other. They all have different personalities, they all have different relationships with their dad. They've all got their own set of daddy issues, and they can all relate to each other because of it, even though each of their interactions with their dad is so very different, as his dad kind of plays them off of each other. I thought it did a great job of talking about culture and touching on it in certain points, because of course they've got their Jamaican British culture. Some of them are black, some of them are mixed race, but they all kind of perceive the world slightly differently, and I think it did a very good job of touching on that, as well as the dad relationship. But equally, this book felt like it had some found family elements to it, because while they are technically family because they're all step siblings, they are also a found family because they haven't talked to each other for X amount of years before they all have to help Dimple. And so they're kind of finding their way back to siblingdom. They're finding a way to love each other even though they didn't have the same upbringing, even though the relation that they have to each other is so tenuous. So I really liked that element to it, and it made it quite wholesome, seeing this family of siblings struggle to be a family and struggle to find their way to connect to each other. Dimple's one of those characters that's really pathetic and helpless and emotional all the time, but I really liked seeing her grow in this book. My one quibble is that I do think the ending isn't as satisfying as it could be. It sets up this whole plot and this whole big problem, and it's solved a bit too easily for my liking, but I also equally just didn't care, because I was more so here for the characterization, for the family bonds, for the relation to their father, for the Jamaican representation, and I think it did all of those things fantastically. So now I want to talk about This Skin Was Once Mine and Other Disturbances by LaRocca, and this is LaRocca doing a horror short story collection again. I didn't like this collection of short stories. There's 4 short stories in this, and each of them has to do with either snake imagery or shedding your skin in some ways, whether that is literal, whether that is metaphorical. It's all done differently in this book, and unfortunately I only liked 1 of the short stories out of 4, which meant this was not a very good collection for me. My main struggle with this is that a lot of these stories felt like they were going for the shock factor. They did something very disturbing or very disgusting and it was to shock you. But after the shock wore off, it was like, but what did this story give me other than a shock? It didn't really scare me, it didn't really chill me to the bone, it didn't really make me feel uncomfortable or any of the things that I wanted horror to make me feel. It just made me feel like, oh, I can't believe someone did that, and then I just moved on with my life. So they just didn't hit in that way. And especially the first one, which is the longest one, it felt like it was going for shock factor again and again and again. So at some point I became desensitized to it and it just wasn't shocking and there was no build to it. So these stories felt a bit aimless to me. I will say the one that I liked, what was the short story I liked? So all of the ones that were kind of more literal, grounded, didn't work for me, but the one short story that I did like that I'll tell you about was called Seedling, and in this one it had something to do with the horror of grief. Grief is one of the topics I really like to read and think about and discuss and unpick, so of course this was going to be the short story that worked for me, but it was also, as I said, the one that depicted grief with horror nature. And then it also was a bit abstract, and I loved that. I loved the concept of abstract nature grief horror, where it particularly looked at the focus of like a dad and son relationship as well. And it was a little bit of that dad and son relationship where the son is gay and he has a gay partner, but the dad doesn't really quite accept or understand or relate to that, and so they felt this conflict between each other for a very long time. And throughout this story and the horror scenario that they go through, they get to know each other a lot better than they did before, and seeing that connection but how it was imbued with the horror element was so very well done. And I think where Eric LaRocca excels is at their abstract horror. Abstract horror is where they are at their best, and if they ever released a short story collection where it was all abstract horror, or another short novel like the one I previously read which was all abstract horror, I would read it because that really works for me. But the stuff that they do where it's grounded in real life is just not really it. So unfortunately this collection was not a good one for me because the majority of the stories were misses, but there is still something that will draw me back to Eric LaRocca's writing each and every time. So we are halfway through the books I have to review for you, and I'm going to have a little interval to talk about 4 books where I will not be reviewing them in this video, but if you sign up to my Patreon you can hear my thoughts on each of these 4 books. So there are some exclusive Patreon wrap-up books that I do. This is because I'm either working on the book or I want to make them Patreon exclusive for whatever reason. And the reason why these 4 are hidden behind a paywall is because I am working on these 4 books. So if you are curious to hear my thoughts on Legend and Lattes by Travis Baldree, if you would like to hear my thoughts on The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King by Carissa Broadbent, book 2 in a series, if you'd like to hear my thoughts on The Wren in the Holly Library by K.A. Linde, or if you'd like to hear my thoughts on The Spellshop by Sarah Beth Durst, then what you need to do is go to the link below to my Patreon. You can sign up to any of the 3 tiers and you will have access to that exclusive Patreon wrap-up. And this is a good time to say thank you to all of my Patrons. I appreciate each and every one of you, and we have the best time on reading sprints. It's Man Wonderland Volume 1 by Jinsei Kataoka and also Kazuma Kondou, and this is the beginning of a manga series in which Ganta, our 14-year-old little boy, is in school in the classroom and he sees this mysterious red figure drift down, even though he is like in a building where he's not on the first floor, and this red man attacks everyone and murders all of his classmates. He's the only one who survives. But as he's the only one who survives when people discover what has happened, they think he is the one who murdered all of his classmates, even though he is completely innocent. And he gets sent to a prison which is within Japan, and it doubles up as a tourist attraction. So it's a tourist attraction detention center that he's been sent to, where he needs to try and do his best to survive, but he's also going to try and do his best to prove that he is innocent. And I really liked this first volume. It did such a good job of setting up the world and the concept and the story and the narrative in a way that I was immediately intrigued by Man Wonderland, which is the name of the detention center tourist attraction, and how brutal it is, how cutthroat it is, but also how entertaining it is to outsiders. I think it did a fantastic job of building Ganta's character. You can already tell that he's going to be the typical manga hero who wants to make the right choices, who wants to do the greater good option, but always feels drawn to trying to survive and what you need to do to survive. So that's the kind of tension that he's got going on. On the cover you can see there's another girl here called Shiro. I love Shiro to pieces. I adore her. She is bubbly, she is sunshiny, and she really cares about the friend that she has made, this one friend that she has made. She's incredibly loyal, but of course that does sometimes mean putting herself in danger and being at odds with some of the things that are happening within the prison. So I'm curious to see how their relationship of friendship is going to develop and what choices they might make in the future, because right now I'm agreeing with Ganta's choices, but I feel like it's very much on the edge and maybe I won't agree all the way through. The artwork is great, it's good enough for me, it keeps me turning the pages and it tells the story very well, and this was just such a fantastic setup to the series that I'm intrigued to see what's going to happen in volume 2. I read Looking Glass Sound by Catriona Ward, and I'm so glad that I finally finished this because I actually started it months ago, wasn't feeling it, put it down, and then picked it up again recently. I really should have just DNF'd it because I didn't like this book at all. It's a horror thriller book. I would lean more into the horror than the thriller side of things, and it's hard for me to describe this book. So you've got a teenager who goes away to summer at a certain area, and in this area there is someone who is stalking the children. He doesn't murder them, he just takes disturbing photos with him holding a knife over a sleeping child's neck. So that is what's happening in the area, and it also has a lot to do with writing and narrative and storytelling and the artistic question of who owns a story when it's happened to multiple people. Should the story go to the person who knows best how to tell it? Should the story only be allowed to be told by the people that were involved? So it also deals with that. It's one of those horror stories which is layered, and you've kind of got to peel back each layer of the book as you read it. And it's not told in a way that's chronological. It's not told in a way that you're going to understand everything as you're reading it. You've got to wait to the end. You've got to wait to that big reveal moment where all of the pieces that you've been juggling is going to slot into place. I don't mind waiting for that. I don't mind being patient. I read Gothic literature, you've got to be patient for that. I read horror as well, and sometimes you just have to be patient for that. But it just wasn't worth the wait for me. It didn't feel genius by the time that I finished reading it. I figured things out, I added things up, and I just thought, that's a story, and I've read it. It didn't particularly horrify me. I think for some people some of this will be quite disturbing and it will feel dark and it will feel disturbing, but my horror tolerance is quite high. Someone who watches a lot of horror and is happily merrily reading it. It's not too gruesome, or it leans more into gruesome horror than psychological horror in my opinion. Yes, that's what I'll say. It leans more into gruesome horror, and I'm not that kind of reader. I don't mind a bit of gruesomeness, but I do like it when there's a psychological aspect to my horror as well, and I thought that this was going to give that, because the way it hints at what it's doing with storytelling and the concept of this, you think you were going to get that, but it is more in the literal sense horror than I expected it to be. And it is incredibly slow paced. It is one of those ones where you have to slog through quite a bit to get to the point. And for me, the slow pace just didn't pay off. And so I got a bit frustrated, I got a bit bored as I was reading. And I definitely got frustrated with our main character as well, because the way that he is, he's a bit pathetic. He's a bit like a wet towel of a main character. And that frustrated me. I just wanted him to grow a bit of a backbone. I wanted him to understand when he was being manipulated or being pulled one way or the other by other characters. He was just incredibly naive, and I was a bit fed up of it by the end of it. So it just took a bit too long to get to the point. It just took a bit too long and I lost interest. And unfortunately, this was not one for me. So one of the picture books that I'm going to talk about in this is Lessons from Our Ancestors by Raksha Dave and illustrated by Kimberlie Clinthorne-Wong. I loved this. I rated it 5 stars and it became a new favourite. So this picture book is all about forgotten histories. It's talking about histories that have been forgotten over time due to either racism or sexism or other reasons as well. It's been crushed by certain historians with their own opinions, but then it also talks about archaeology because our author is an archaeologist, and she talks about how archaeology has discovered the truth that historians have tried to squash and given irrevocable proof of what has happened in the past, and how that archaeology has then helped us fuel and figure out the information that's in this book. So to give you an example here, we are going to jump straight to, I loved this one. This, you can see as well that the artwork is incredibly bright, incredibly colourful and exciting. The text is all over the book, so it's not all in like one place. It makes it a bit more playful and easier to read. And it's about the Black Pharaohs who ruled ancient Egypt. And so in this one, it's talking about the Kush people, which I had no idea about. And these people built pyramids but were not in Egypt. After it gives you information about the Kush people and their history, the next page will tell me about what particular artifacts archaeologists discovered to help build the history that we saw on the previous page. And at the bottom here, it's going to tell me why the history was forgotten and then how they rediscovered it. And it does that for every single piece of history that's forgotten. It will give you one page where it'll talk about what the history is, the next page is the archaeology and the reasons why it's forgotten. And I think it was just such a structured and clear way of giving me history that I really didn't know and I loved getting to know, but also why it's forgotten and how it has been like defeated and re-earthed. Fantastic. The colours and the illustrations brought it to life, which makes it more approachable for children to read. It's one of the ones that's not for very young children because there is quite a lot of text on the page, but one for a bit more the mature readers. And I will say this is an all-age picture book. I had a fantastic time reading it. You don't have to read it from start to finish. You can dip in and out. There's a lot of information in there. Absolute gem. Highly recommend to parents, guardians, teachers, and to adults as well. Of course, I read a Sarah Simone book. So I read Cards of Love, The Moon by Sarah Simone. This is the final book that I have to read in the New Camelot American Queen series that I love with all my heart and soul. I've banged on about this series as I've slowly read them all throughout the year. This is a spin-off of it, and it's one of the last ones you want to read, I believe. You really don't want to read this before you're finished with the complete original trilogy because you will end up spoiling yourself. This one is Merlin and Nimue's story. We know that Merlin has magic from the main series, so do expect some magic in this one. Also, please expect BDSM because this is a Sarah Simone American Queen book. There will be explicit and very, very steamy BDSM scenes. And I enjoyed this one. I had a good time with it. I don't think it's perfect because this story felt like it should have been a novel instead of a novella. There was quite a lot to the magic here. There was quite a lot to their history and their relationship and the repetitiveness of the timeline that got a lot of detail and meant that the romantic, steamy BDSM stuff got a bit sidelined, which is fine. We don't just need to read about BDSM all the time. But I think it needed a novel to like properly flesh out the magic element while also to properly flesh out their relationship and their love story, and for us to get some of those steamy scenes. Because while her steam is as good as ever, I don't think it's the best steam that I've read from Sarah Simone. I do think she's written better romance elements and better steamy BDSM scenes. I think if you are reading this one, you're going for the story of getting to know Merlin a bit more, and you're getting for the story of how the whole New Camelot series, in terms of the magics of it, happens, and that was incredibly satisfying to see. I did really like Nimue, and I liked some of the key messages of this, because the key messages of this is talking about age and retirement and when your job is done, and when do you pass the rod to the next person, when do you admit that you've served your time, you've parented and you've guided as much as possible, and it's time to let them fly the nest. And I think that's what I'm going to say the main themes are in this book. but also it's about finding love or letting yourself succumb to love as an older person. I think Merlin is in his 50s in this book, that's what I want to say. While it is an age gap romance and Nimue is significantly younger, although of age, please don't worry, I do think it was interesting to see him feeling that age and feeling like the impact of his age in the choices that he makes romantically. So this was good. I had a good time with it, but it also was not my favourite Sarah Simone. And then last but not least, I want to talk about Felix's Favorite Day by Fiona Lowry and illustrated by Jonna Brewer. And this is a children's picture book, and it's about Felix's favorite day. It's written in rhyme and it's very, very easy to read. And actually my favorite thing about this picture book is, again, the illustrations. I think they're really bubbly and very well done. The colors are just so light and lovely. The text itself is very, very, very basic. You're getting one sentence on a page. So this is quite an early reader's picture book if you're interested in it. And it's nice. I like the story to it. I don't think it rocks my world. There wasn't really a moral message to take from it. I think what I particularly like this one for is for people who are learning to read, who can only read like a sentence at a time, or who are there largely for the illustrations. They're going to enjoy this book. Personally, as an adult reading it without a child, there wasn't much to take away from it, but I do think it's a good one to have on the shelves, and I think I recommend it mostly to parents and guardians rather than to teachers having in schools. There you have it. Those are 10 books that I've recently read and my thoughts and opinions on each of every single one of them. Please let me know in the comment section down below if you've read any of these books, if you're planning to read any of these books. Let me know what you've recently read and enjoyed. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!